Well, listen, guys, I was given this title, Disgust. It's interesting. And so, you know, I just decided to do with it what I wanted to do with it. And it's not really going to be so much political discourse, but I'm going to say more public discourse. How are we going to work on this together? I'm going to actually give you more medical examples, because my work as a physician became in my middle career dealing with ethics in healthcare, which often resulted in dealing with conflict within families for trying to decide what shall we do for someone who's lost their capacity to decide. And that was a conflict which often was resolved by what we call an ethics consultation. I have been teaching at Kansas University School of Medicine, not actually at the university, but a couple of miles away from it in a community hospital of 250 beds, where the university had an arrangement to send 20 students and resident doctors in internal medicine and family practice and surgery to that hospital for training. We were doing this back in 1970 because the state was pushing medical school to produce more docs. They couldn't. They didn't have enough teaching beds. So they hired me to run this program in a community hospital. So I taught medicine for 50 years. Mid-career, I decided I've been teaching in the local seminaries in Kansas City as well, because one of my major goals is to make faith and medicine integrated, work together. So I decided to take a Ph.D. at the University of Chicago Divinity School, and I worked with a fellow that I've been reading for some time, who was dealing in what he called practical theology. And that's a theology that deals with pastoral care of individuals, and primarily dealing with ethics. I was taught ethics by James Jefferson, who was a well-known teacher of many of the early ethicists in healthcare ethics in this country. So then, in 1995, I started that program in 85, finished that, was gone from practice for a couple of years. And then in 1995, I was asked to be scholar at the Disgust Bioethics Center, which was an ethics organization in Kansas City that was trying to teach ethics in healthcare around the country. And so I had opportunity to be around the country a great deal. In 2004, I retired from there and moved out here because our two sons, as they say, escaped Kansas City. And they're graphic artists, had their own business out here. And as they started producing grandchildren 18 years ago, we said we need to be here to protect our investments. So we moved out here and I began working at OHSU in the ethics department up there. So that's my background, working in healthcare ethics. And in ethics, we're often dealing with conflict. So we're dealing with working from disgust to empathy. Now, somebody give me the Latin derivation of the word disgust. You all have had Latin, have you not? Oh, how could you possibly? Well, then perhaps let's go then directly to empathy. That's Greek.
Can we pause for a second, Dr. Potter? I've been told that your head's cut off and also the sound. So I'm going to see if I can, if you don't mind getting your coffee, I'm going to see if I can move the Star Trek Enterprise
My head cut off.
over to you if that's going to help the sound. Let's see if this is going to help at all.
Okay, well, I'll do what's necessary to, in fact, the student the people in the class are more important than I am, as long as they can hear me, that's all.
But, Lynette, can you tell me if you can hear, you can text me if you want, is
now-
this better?
Well, let's go on with our conversation. Who's gonna give me the Greek derivation for empathy?
Yeah, I used to know that. When I hear it, I'll
Well, I just feel so good that I could be smarter than the rest. You know, with that panel this morning, I spent 50 years believing I was pretty smart. I learned so much from those 5 people. Did you not? I mean, that was super. I expected to get a little sleep. You know, I went on the front row so I wouldn't be, I would try to stay awake so it wouldn't be obvious. That was super. So anyway, Gustare taste. Eating. The gusta is gustare is just to eat, to taste something. And to this gustare is for it to be a bad taste. You want to reject it. So to be disgusted is to not like what you're eating, not like what's going on. Empathy is a made-up word in 1906. An Englishman trying to translate a German word, Einfühlung, which had been invented in the late 1800s, to talk about feeling like another person can feel. He said, I'm going to take a couple of pieces of Greek, the prefix em, meaning with, and pathy, meaning the sort of English form of pathos, which means to suffer with. Now we've got a Latin word that we brought right into English that does the very same thing, compassion. The prefix com in Latin is with, passion. Patios is a Latin verb which means to suffer. So compassion is to suffer with. Empathy is sort of a made-up Greek word to suffer with. And it really was trying to re-emphasize an old word, sympathy, which does exactly the same thing. But for some reason, at the turn of the century, probably influenced by Nietzsche, who said sympathy is just trying to be taking pity on people. We don't want to do that. So they're eager to come up with another word. But there's really no distinction between sympathy and empathy. Actually, they both mean what David Hume in the 1700s said, it's the fellow feeling. How to feel like the other feels, okay? So, Paul Metzger says, Father, how do you get from being disgusted with people to feeling like they feel and resolve the conflict or difference between you? Not a bad idea. I think that I'm going to present to you 2 ways of approaching how to deal with getting from disgust to empathy. One emphasizes reason. The other emphasizes emotion. Gut feeling. Okay? My definition for ethics, as I teach, right now I'm teaching over at Warner Pacific, teaching versus ethics in their new program. Ethics is good reasons for action. Pretty straightforward, simplified idea about ethics. Nothing highly philosophical. It's just finding good reasons for how you're going to act, how you're going to behave. Lots of guys try to bust that down and just say, well, you got to do what's right. You know, and that was Immanuel Kant. Big time. Got to do what's right. You got to follow the rules. And others came along and said, no, you got to do what's good for people. You got to do whatever's going to bring the most good for the most people. So right and good sort of can be in conflict a little bit. I've had that situation where if I were to follow the law or the rules of the hospital that I was working, I might not get done the best for my patient. You can imagine, can't you, that there could be tension between what's right, what follows the rules, and what's good for the patient in this situation. So I was looking for the go-between. H. Richard Niebuhr, who was the greatest of the Protestant theological ethicists of the 20th century, H. Richard Niebuhr, he said, what we have to do is what fits the situation. And that's the third piece. The fitting part is trying to find the ground, the middle ground between doing what's right and doing what's good. And that's part of what I keep talking about. Now, I think ethics is a practical strategy for preventing and resolving and coping with moral problems. I won't get into a lot of complications here, except to define what's a moral problem. A moral problem, can you read it for me? Tell me what it is, I've forgotten. It's on your paper.
Conflict of interest.
A moral problem is when we got conflict of values. Guess what? It fits right into the retreat here. Does it not? The seminar already. We got a conflict in values. Guess what? Now remember, what's a value? The value is what really matters to you. You come up with all kinds of definitions of what the value is. But what you have to remember is we are value-driven decision systems. We decide how to behave depending on what we value. Okay? That's what drives our decisions. What we value. So we got to examine a little more about that. I worked out, again, using H. Richard Niebuhr as a start. I came up with sort of a process that comes down to 3 questions. Good old Missouri, he was a good old Missouri boy. He was born out this west of St. Louis in Missouri. He said there are just 2 questions in ethics. What's going on here? And what's the fitting response to what's going on here? And I learned that by reading all of his material as guided by James Justice and my teacher at the University of Chicago. But I thought there was something in between those 2 questions that needed to be brought out a little more thoroughly. So in reading around with the philosophers of the day, I came up with the middle ground, the question in the middle. What values do I want to protect here? What's going on in this situation that's my values or the values that I think ought to be protected, preserved, made real? Okay? Is that making sense to you all? That's the core of what ethics is about. Finding out which values we need to make real, make them work. All right. So, if disgust for persons is a consequence of rejecting their values, and I gave you all kinds of synonyms there. You see them, disgusting, offensive, adversity, so on. You got another synonym for disgusting? How you feel towards other people who think differently than you? Other words, other synonyms? Fill me in. I could have looked it up. I think they said there were going to be 57, and I said, well, that's taking up a lot of paper there. Surely there's another synonym that you would like to use to describe how it is that you feel towards people when you are in conflict with them. Yeah.
I don't know if this is a right answer, but what comes to my mind is rejection.
Rejection, I'll accept that as a high quality. Yeah, I didn't have it down there, did I? Rejection, good. Yeah.
I'm thinking of frustrating, but it's not strong enough.
Not strong enough?
Frustrating.
Maybe I'm disappointed. Is that what you told me? I'm disappointed.
Frustrating.
It's frustrated, all right. I'll grant you a B+.
Yeah, it's not quite strong enough.
Well, you know, maybe I'm being picky there, but how about hate?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I didn't think of that till just now. I missed hate, didn't I? Because that's often what we see going on in conflict, that people hate one another. Or at least they behave like they hate one another, don't they?
We didn't allow our girls to say hate.
You didn't?
No.
Well, how'd they get along in school?
It was I strongly dislike. So they bring that back to this day. They strongly dislike something.
My mother said, don't call another person a fool. No, that's in the gospel somewhere, Mark or whatever. Don't call anybody a fool. Yeah, but you use.
Strongly dislike.
I can't remember my mom being on top of that, but I think she would have agreed with you, yes, yeah.
Distorted?
Huh?
Distorted, like you have a distorted view.
Okay,
That's
now, but that's starting to admit that maybe you've got something you need to learn. If no, you're saying that person is distorting things, is that what you're saying? And that's why you're rejected. Okay, well,
And
anyway,
in the last election cycle, 2016, we were discussing the word you used in despicable.
despicable was one I didn't think of, yeah, thank you. Because I don't like the word. In fact, I don't even know what the Latin derivation of it is, I'll have to go, I will find that out as I get home.
Another one comes to mind, if there's something I value and you're against it, you become my enemy.
Why not go straight to the problem? Don't you? You're disgusted with people who are your enemies. You have topped the conversation, you have ended the discussion unless you're gonna have it.
I was gonna say, I think it's the other way around.
Well, what is?
I'm disgusted, it's not, I'm disgusted because they're my enemy, it's that I see them as my enemy because their point of view or their actions are disgusting.
They're disgusting, absolutely disgusting.
But that comes before the enemy piece.
But I think we're clear about that, and we need to be clear about this, about what it is that we're trying to get away from. And we're trying to get away from seeing the other as our enemy. Yeah, we're trying to get beyond that, aren't we? That even though they are trying to negate our values, we're going to have to try to get beyond calling them and relating to them as an enemy.
And one of the reasons that seems to be important is we have this saying, all's fair in love and war. If you're my enemy, what is fair for me to do to thwart you and to support my values? Can I harm you personally?
Listen to the magic word there, harm. That's going to come up on the other side of the page here, okay? Harm is going to come up here in a little bit, yeah. There are some words that really mean something to us. So words are just little symbol systems, sorry. You know what I finally learned, I wasn't all that smart during my grade school period. And but when I got into high school, I really took it seriously. I took Latin during my second year of high school, totally changed my understanding of language. I learned that these things are just little symbol systems. The deal is you gotta put the symbols down in the right order. When the teacher will mark you down if you haven't spelled it right. Spelling it right is not the big deal. Interpreting it right is the big deal. Okay. So empathy is trying to understand the other person, right? Feel like the other person feels. Be aware of where the other person is. I think I want to get from disgust to empathy. I want to use reason. I want to think things out. Don't you? Don't you think, if you take my definition of ethics as good reason for action, then you've got to have a way to come up with good reason. And that uses reason. There is a social psychologist, very famous for the last 10 years since he published this wonderful book entitled The Righteous Mind. His name is Jonathan Haidt. He pronounces his name Haidt. Okay. Haidt, fate, but who, well, I don't know, a lot of people, they're trying to do something different. He uses hate, okay, which is not all that comforting, but that's the way it is. Now, he's made 3 claims. With those claims at the bottom of the page. Intuition comes first, reasoning comes second. There's more to morality than harm and fairness, and morality finds the blind. Those are the 3 sections of the book. Turn the page over. He, as a social psychologist, did a very, very vigorous work. He and his team, he didn't do it himself, interviewed 300,000 people. Do you understand that number? I mean, if anybody's ever done any social research, you know, if they get 1,000 interviews, you can write a whole paper on that. Maybe a dissertation, I don't know. But 300,000, and he did it worldwide. He's fluent in Spanish, so he himself covered South America. And he had many others covering other parts of the world in the team. What they were trying to do is to come up with a way of recognizing what were the most dominant ways that people use to make ethical decisions. And they came up with a cluster of 6, what he calls moral intuition. When Tom Chivey was talking about emotional intelligence, I immediately thought of this. That these are sort of pieces of emotional intelligence that guide us in decision making. I was awful nervous about this. When I was working in ethics in healthcare, what I found that many, particularly the doctors, wanted to jump to a conclusion. They knew the problem, here's the solution. I mean, that's the way doctors are trained to think. This is the problem, we're going to fix it. And they did it with what we typically call a gut reaction. I feel it in my gut. That's just the colloquial way of saying, I'm using my emotion, I'm using my moral intuition to solve this ethical issue. Does that make sense to you? The difference between these two. Thinking it out through reason and responding using your moral intuition as your guide. Well, let's just take a quick look at the pattern of 6 moral intuitions.
Can I show on the screen?
Absolutely, do that. Thank you, Paul.
Okay, so please see if it works.
Oh my goodness, he did it. This is not expected. Really, that's really blessed. That's really true. This possibility. The 6 patterns. The first, he calls it care, and its opposite, harm. Yeah, you were right on target with where he is in trying to sort this out. Fairness versus cheating. Liberty, frustration, authority, subversion, loyalty, betrayal, sanctity, degradation. You know, now, if you picked up this book, which you now get it used for about $8 or $9, it's not really cheap, but you discover that those 6 are what we used to call in the old days virtues. Virtues, which is Latin for the word strength. That which gives us strength, gives us it's the thing that gives us the power to make decisions and to be good about our decisions. And the opposite then is vice, of course. Now he lays out these 6 patterns, and there's a little bit of an explanation there if they're right. To care for people is to show compassion, is to avoid harming them. Fairness has to do with treating people equally, sharing with one another, seeking the common good, but saying Liberty is more freedom to express oneself, not feel like you cannot say what's on your mind. Authority is more respecting law and order, following the rules. This, of course, is where Immanuel Kant, his thinking, would be pretty much located. Loyalty is real tricky because this is where your loyalty to the group that you're part of. I'm trying to identify my group, and our friend from Hawaii made me try to remember where I'm from. John Potter was a Scotsman. John Potter came to America in 1740, and he went to Pennsylvania. There he became a wealthy merchant and a farmer. He was a general, brigadier general of the Revolutionary Army, and a member of the Continental Congress. He's my great grandfather. Now it's been downhill since then, but I keep thinking, where am I from? Well, that's the Scottish side. The other side, all the names there are Lyman, Peacher, Simpson, very English, aren't they? Now, I thought Potter probably did keep the Scottish. So I'm from the Isles. I married a girl whose her mother's folks' name was Schlenker. And on the father's side, it's Spielberg. They all got off the boat at Ellis Island about 1910. Very rich. So our children we're a mixed breed, are we not? Yeah. But I keep thinking, where am I really from? I'm from Central Missouri. That's who I am. Farmers. My father left the farm a month before the Depression began, took a bus to Detroit. And his brother went out again, and they became welders and worked in the automotive production industry. And he learned all about these magic things called conveyors. So he became a field foreman for the fair manufacturing company, and he and his brother and 7 of his good friends from Central Missouri were on a job in Kansas City in 1947 to convert the automotive industry back from the military production to civilian production after the war, and decided to start their own business. Now, where am I going? By the time I graduated from high school, I am now a privileged white man with enough money to send me to Kansas University. First, my father didn't graduate from high school. He said, geometry was too hard. He was a superb builder. He grew up he was just, that's who I am. That's who I am. And all of us are part of a tribe of some sort. And loyalty to that tribe seems to be very, very important to us. And we need to, it's one of the things that we both cherish and feel a little bit like we want to get over it.
I got a quick question. Can tribes be other groups? Like I'm a evangelical Republican.
Absolutely. That's a tribe all unto itself. Absolutely. And you can be a member of several tribes, can't you? You can be a different kinds of tribes for different kinds of things. Right. I'm a singer. I was trained as, I'm a classic musician. And, that's a tribe that I cherish being part of. But, excellent. There can be multiple, we can belong to multiple tribes. Yet there's a loyalty to our tribe that sometimes causes us to think in terms of us versus them. Yeah, against them. I'm disgusted with them. But I keep being called by Jesus to have compassion on the other. to be friends to the enemy. And I got a problem. I got to get over this disgusting stuff and get into empathy. Now notice what Haidt does with this. Look at that graph. Look at the bottom line of the graph. What he's done is all of those people that they interviewed categorize themselves as very liberal, slightly conservative, very, very conservative. Sort of a line across the bottom there. And notice where they fall. The very liberal ones are big on liberty, care, and fairness. Clear up at the top of the graph there, see? And the conservative ones are not so hot on those three. But yet, look where they cross. The conservative folks find all six of them a way to make all six of them work together. And Haidt calls that the conservative advantage. That all six of these moral intuitions have kind of a balanced sense. That's hard for me to grasp, being a very liberal one, being an old worn out liberal. I had a trouble. I was raised conservative. I remember the time when my father's father was bouncing. Missouri farmer, he's bouncing this infant on his knee and crying. This is 1951. Don't cry, child, don't cry. Truman's not going to run for president again. As if that was the worst thing it could possibly happen. Truman to run for president. But I became very liberal, but I keep wondering, is care and fairness and liberty where I really am? Do this for me. In your mind, and talk to me about it if you can, where would you locate Jesus in this spectrum of moral intuition? Where would Jesus hit the high point? Would Jesus be more concerned with loyalty or with care?
Yeah.
You go with care.
Fairness, and liberty.
So you sort of, you can imagine, you could put that down there if you were going to put a little graph on the board here. You could pretty put Jesus up in there in that corner. I'm not quite willing to do that totally, but it's worth thinking about, Or do we at least be thinking about where do you belong on the pattern of moral intuition? Now, regardless of whether we're going to go with our gut feelings or with reason, we got to make decisions. And that's what I do when I do ethics consultations. I've got a divided family. Some want to take grandma off the ventilator and let her die, and others don't. Conflict. One's disgusted with the other. So, how do I operate in what we call that wonderful piece in Corinthians, you can't give you a quote, about the ministry of reconciliation? How can we reconcile the differences? It's not easy. Let's do a case. Sharon is 37 years old. She is now several years into Huntington's chorea, which is a debilitating neurological disease that causes your muscles to fail. Your mind usually stays intact. Your muscles fail, and you get to a place that you can either eat, chew, or swallow. She's now been 2 years in the nursing home. During that time, she has made it very clear to the attending nursing staff and to her aunt and to her mother that she would not want a feeding tube placed either through her nose or directly through the stomach here to keep her alive when she can no longer eat. She's made that very plain, very clear. She also says that her 10-year-old son, who should be under the care of the boy's father, with whom she's been living for many years, but they're not together. Sharon has been very ill now. She's not been able to eat. She's quite malnourished. She's got a couple of bad bed sores because they just don't heal if you're not eating well. And her mother takes her over to Kansas University to a neurologist over there. And persuades the neurologist to have a gastric feeding tube placed. Sharon comes back to the nursing facility with the feeding tube in place. Sharon is so enraged, she stops talking to anyone. She just retreats. The nursing staff are really upset because they know what Sharon wanted, and this is not it. And they come to the medical director of the nursing home, which is absolutely and says, Father, what are you going to do about this? Well, I don't seem to be very, very interested in doing anything different. Maybe I want to think about it. Well, I just didn't do it. They're pretty upset. You could say they're disgusted. They're disgusted with the situation. They're disgusted with Sharon's mother. They're disgusted with me. Tell me what's going on. Describe the situation.
Well, her mother is taking matters into her own hands. Because she's the mother.
Because she's the mother?
Well,
Just because she's the mother?
No, because she loves like a mother loves.
Oh!
But she thinks that the best thing in loving that child is to keep her alive, even though she doesn't want to have a feeding tube.
So mother says, I'm going to do the most loving thing regardless of what she wants.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Does she pin that down pretty well? Looks like it, doesn't it? Yeah. It looks like the motive of the mother is love.
Yeah.
Can we agree to that?
Yeah.
It's not cash. She's not going to get any money for her daughter dying. You can make up the story to where she would. You know, I made up that story to give her $100,000 if we kill her, and then she goes a different way. But I do that just for teaching purposes. Today we won't do that. Because I'm telling you the real story right here. Okay. That's one thing that's going on. You're describing the situation, and that's what you do when you answer Niebuhr's first question, what's going on here? Okay, you got one piece of what else is going on? You mentioned it, and that is that Sharon has said, I don't want that. That's another piece of the situation that we're aware of. What else?
The nursing staff feel like they've been cheated. So all these patterns, they were betrayed. They feel like their authority was questioned. They feel that their patient was harmed.
And patient's liberty was violated.
So all of those.
Because you can translate liberty into autonomy for me to make my own decisions. But yeah, you're on target. Keep going.
And then when they came to you, they feel like their loyalty to you might have been betrayed because you didn't give them the answer that they wanted.
Yeah, whether you go along with Haidt altogether, he's at least helped us identify different aspects of what's going on in this situation. Very well done, yes, very well done. You said the nurses were, what word did you use? Disappointed, disgusted, what?
True.
Betrayed, yeah, betrayed, that's right. Another good word, betrayed. Why? They're just following orders, don't they? And they're gonna keep this gal alive, her decubitus ulcers are gonna heal.
But you're
It's not such a bad deal.
head of their tribe, and they expect the tribe to have cohesion.
Oh, hey, you have got a new angle. I had not thought about that. Say more. That's fresh for me. I've told this story about 5,632 times in the teaching situations. I've never thought about that. Tell me something.
Well, one of the things we expect out of our tribe is we expect loyalty, we expect sympathy, and from the tribe back to us, and we expect a cohesion in the tribe.
We expect cohesion to the values.
Yes.
When I was during World War II, I lived in Martinsburg, Illinois, where my mother and my two siblings at that time, before Sydney came later, lived there because my dad was all over the country as a conveyor team leader, converting the country from automotive industry to the military production. Martinsburg is 26 miles from Pittsfield, the county seat. There are no bridges over the creek, no running water, no electricity. There are 5 houses, a school, and 2 churches. One church says there ain't no hell, the other church says the hell there ain't. And so they had a little dispute there, but it was a tranquil community. And we knew exactly how to behave because we were all loyal to the same set of values. I was in the 3rd grade when that damn Democratic legislature in Springfield outlawed the common dipper. And we could no longer go to the bucket in the corner of the room and pick up a common dipper of water and drink from it. We had to bring a cup with our name on it. And we hung them on the wall on nails. Because our liberty had been violated. Our values had been violated. I still have the glass chancel that we took communion from in our church, the Church of Christ. One, we all drank from the same one. We knew about the theory of bugs. We knew bugs were pretty bad. I was playing with a little fellow on Friday that died on Monday for the theory. We knew bugs. But we were going to keep our values together, you know, and so what we said in our tribe, this is the way we do things around here. And that, for me, was the definition of what ethics is about. It's a definition of what a culture is, what a tribe is.
So do tribal traditions become values?
Oh, I think they are. I think value is at the core of them. That's the way I don't want to say it's all there is to the tradition, but values are mixed in there, aren't they? Because values become that we take values and we create the meaning of our lives. And the meaning of our lives is delivered to us by our culture. How we see the world. How we understand the world.
So what value do we receive out of conforming to the behavior of the tribe? Because drinking out of a common cup, or wearing certain clothes, or cutting my hair a certain way, or having tattoos on my face, or whatever it is, my tribe may say I'm for it or I'm against it. What do I derive?
Okay, answer the question, somebody. What do you get out of it?
You get a sense of belonging.
Ah, the magic word, belonging, isn't it? Thank you so much. Did I write that down for you to say? No, you said it spontaneously. I thought I had given you that clue. Yeah, and I think that's what you get. You get a sense that you belong. We got a fancier word now in sociology. We call it identity, don't we? I'm identified with the group. You don't identify with the group identifies you. The group tells you who you are. Now you can join or not join, you know, you can run off. Well, in 1947, I left Harvester. And I went to Kansas City, Kansas. Boy, it was a whole lot different. I had to learn all over again how we do things around here. Yeah. It's good. Yeah.
Question for you.
Yeah.
How do you get, so I have two children,
Okay.
how would you protect? So I think that values from the tribe come to personal tribe from the parents. That's where your values and morals start from.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And then you see them go off to college and you see them live their own life.
Mhm.
And how do you get them to be able to depict that next tribe? So for example, let's just say Hitler was a spy for the Nazi party to come back, and then he ended up adopting those values and morals, which he became the Nazi leader.
The epitome of those values.
Yes. So how would you help protect against that? Or is that just something that you can't do?
Well, gee whiz, you know, one of the problems with teaching as I do, using what we used to call the Socratic method, asking questions, is if somebody will ask me a question that I don't have the slightest idea. You know, and hopefully it's at the end of the class and we can teach it. That's as smooth as, that's what Paul does. But that says 10 minutes, I think, yeah. Yeah.
I do.
Okay, well, you know, I take it in terms of my own sons, two sons. They are now 55 and 52. And they have sons. The older one has one son, 18. The other has two sons, 16 and 13. And I'm seeing that process working itself out right now. As I saw my sons leave the tribe that I raised them to be part of, and they are now in somewhat a different tribe. But I've had to let that be. I did not pin them down to always be loyal to the tribe they were raised in. I gave them lots of opportunity to witness to the fact that from the point of view of my wife and I, the way we did things worked for us. It worked for us. You have to decide whether it's going to work for you. Just in terms of our Christian faith, the older son, vigorous member of the Ainsworth United Church of Christ here in town. The younger son and his wife, who grew up Episcopalian, no church arrangement. So one son followed in terms of the Christian tradition tribe pretty closely. The other son, a different way. And I think that it has been best that I let that happen. Now, I've been cheating. At age 13, the older son, who's now 18, began his theological lessons from grandfather. And when he questioned whether or not he should go through the confirmation class and join Ainsworth United Church of Christ, I helped work him into a decision to accept that. And he did join and was baptized and understands himself as a member of the body of Christ. The other two, the first one became 13 and started grandpa with the theology lessons. And they're moving along with theology lessons. 13-year-old now got started. I've been giving them a sense of of a particular way of being part of the tribe of the Christian tradition. And when they become adults, I'm going to stop that. Although I'm cheating again. Oh gosh, I am such a cheater. I have been collecting, I'm now up to 27 books identical libraries for all three grandsons. On graduation from high school, they will get the pile. I say you don't have to read them, you just have to have them on yourselves, because I think that intelligence is 9/10 possession. You all do that. But that's going to be sitting behind them all their life. They're not going to throw that away. His grandpa has been helping them understand that part of the tribe. I just think that that's important.
So I'm sorry, so let's flip the script, because I see this a lot in the younger generation, even my generation, is that first one, my brother has a lot of animosity towards my parents for keeping them in that lifestyle, that tribe.
Forcing them to stay in the tribe.
So how would you go about bridging that?
Well, that's what the conference is about, is trying to find the bridging. We're gonna work on that at the bottom of the fact sheet.
This gets complicated. It's one thing if it's a lifestyle choice and you want to wear short pants and our tribe says you want to wear long pants.
Yeah, right.
But if it says your choice is going to send you to hell forever, and that's my belief and my value,
Right.
then how do I feel good about you making a different choice to join a different tribe?
Well, what to me, you still are stuck with the necessary option of not forcing, because forcing forces away. And that's why we go to the bottom of the last page. How do we get across these barriers, huh? Well, the first thing to me is listen. In teaching medicine, in medical school, I had to train young physicians to learn to listen. One of the ways I did that, I never allowed a medical student to stand at the bedside. They had to sit down and meet the patient face to face. That was the first step. Then I say you listen carefully to what they are telling you. And I think listening to one another is emphasized by our panelists this morning. That we have to listen to one another. And to listen is to be open to what's being said and not rejecting it as it's being said. You just gotta take it in, don't you? To me, that's the first step of empathy, of feeling the feeling of the other, is to listen to what they're saying. Because what you're out to do is to understand where they are coming from. We say that often, where are you coming from? That's what we're out to do, is to find out where they're coming from. Why is it that you have such a understanding of life, such a belief in life, that way of following life, okay? So you gotta achieve that understanding of the other's perspective by listening. Then I think, at least from my experience, the next thing I have to do is I have to explain my position. And I have found so often, when I try to explain my position to another person, I begin to stumble and have just a little trouble being sure that I really understand what my position is. You ever feel that way? If I'm trying to explain why I feel that way to another person, I'm not altogether fluid about that. And what I discover when I'm trying to explain it to another is I'm trying to discover myself and understand myself. If you read the first chapter of John Calvin's Institutes of Religion, the pieces that he wrote in the 1600s, through several editions, he was very clear that the first step of understanding God is to understand yourself. And the more that I've gotten clear about myself and my position, where I am in thought life, whether it's faith life, political life, whatever life, the more I understand about myself, the clearer I am about how it is that the other and I have differences and maybe more similarities than I have allowed. It doesn't always work, but it works enough that we need to work at it. Because we have to look for common ground. I even use this uncomfortable word, compromise. I heard compromise being used at least 3 times this morning. And compromise doesn't mean that I give up my principles so that we can agree. But it does mean that I examine my particular interpretation of my principles to be sure that I really understand what the difference is. And in doing that, I have found so much that I have been off. There are 2 fine gentlemen in my church congregation, Gracious Methodist Church up in Gresham. Both of them are just rankly conservative. For an old liberal, that makes me disgusted. But you know, I kind of like these guys. One of them is a building contractor, and he's the trustee, takes care of the church building, and he's good at it. And anytime I want to get something done around the church, I just ask Doug. You know, and so we've been friends at the level of fixing whatever needs to get fixed. But we disagree otherwise. So the 3 of us decided that we're going to try to put an end to that. I said, okay, you guys choose a book, not too long a book that we can read together and talk about it. Pretty conservative. We talked about it, and I learned more about them and their way of thinking. And then I chose the book. They learned more about me and my way of thinking. We are good friends. Jesus, in my mind, putting it sort of abstractly, Jesus teaches us a new order of relationships. A new order of relationships. That's a fancy, abstract way of saying a different way to relate to one another. That to me is at the core of the kingdom. And that's what we're talking about in this whole peace-making conference. How can we find a new order of relationships? How can we move from disgust to empathy? I think we need both emotion and reason. I think in the way that the brain works, cognition, thought, and emotion are not separate, they function together. Emotion is that which enriches, gives power, gives energy to my values. The cognitive side is the one that articulates it, gives it a little bit of a sense of kind of held together, it makes sense, if you will. But it's the emotion that gives it the energy that makes it truly a value. And if I ever just remember that ethics is about dealing with conflicted values, finding good reasons to act in a way that will bring that conflict to a close. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Because all conflict does not appear to dissolve, but more dissolves than we could ever imagine. Somehow there's a saving possibility in Jesus' invitation for us to be peacemakers. Thank you.